Hello and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura and today is my January reading wrap-up, aka short book reviews for the books I read in January. And I read 10 books this month. I had a plan to read less this year because I wanted to make more time for movies and I guess that was it, just more time for movies. But that did not happen and I ended up reading 10 books, which is pretty awesome. So even though I didn't get my goal of watching more movies, that's okay because I read 10 books, which is still cool. I did get the chance to watch A Place Beyond the Pines, which I've been meaning to watch for ages, but I kept putting it off. But I finally got around to watching that and I loved that movie. I highly recommend it. I wish it was based on a book so that I could do a book first movie and just really go in depth to it. But anyway, so that was one movie I watched this month that I really loved. So I would definitely recommend that one. But going into February, I do want to make more time for movies, which seems so silly. I wanting to make time for movies just seems like a funny thing to say, but regardless. Also, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm sitting somewhere different today. I thought I would switch things up. I usually film in front of my bookcase, and I am very proud of my book collection, so of course I want to show it off when I film, but I don't know, I guess maybe I was just wanting to switch it up and maybe my viewers would like a different view. Although when we're out of town, I do, film in different locations. But anyway, I thought I would film somewhere different. I don't think you can see my street name from outside. So I think it's good to go. Although this was kind of blank, so I ended up stacking some books right here. Out of the 10 books I read this month, these 5 are the ones that I bought. And I don't buy books until after I've read them. So the fact that I bought these tells you that I liked them a fair amount. So that gives you a look right there into the top 5 of the month. And last year, my reading wrap-ups, I talked about the books in order from the one I liked the least to the one I liked the most. And then I had the best book of the month and the best book of the year. I was trying to think of a way to make my book reading wrap-ups more interesting this year while doing something different than last year. And basically, I couldn't come up with anything, a way to switch it up and make it interesting. So I'm just going to talk about them in the order in which I read them, which is basically like the way everybody does their wrap-ups, right? The reason I did last year's ranking style with best book of the year and everything was because I wanted to do something different than what everybody else was doing with their wrap-ups. But yeah, I guess I got kind of tired of doing it in that way, so I wanted to switch it up this year, but I couldn't think of a way to switch it up. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about them in order in which I read them and, give their star rating and whatever. But if people comment on this video and if people loved my ranking style that I did last year, then maybe starting in February, I will start that up yet again. So let me know down in the comments if you want me to rank these and have a best book of the month and everything, or if you don't care and you're like, hey, just talk about the books however, it doesn't matter. So let me know in the comments down below. But to kick things off with the first book I read this month, that was, spoiler alert, by Michael Ausiello. This is the story of Kit and Michael's 14-year-long relationship, the last year of which Kit was battling cancer. And as you can see by the title, Kit dies in the end of this book. So going into it, it's probably going to be heart-wrenching, right? And it's probably going to make you cry. And it does, but it also has a surprising amount of humor in it as well. And I just thought it was a great balance. And having humor makes the sad moments just even more powerful and poignant. I remember reading a book about how to tell a story, and his advice was make them laugh before you make them cry. That way the crying is even more potent. And that is definitely what we get here in Spoiler Alert. So a beautiful story, a beautiful book, very sad, but also just very touching. And I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. The audiobook was fantastic as well. Ausiello narrates it himself and he's a wonderful narrator. So yeah, if you want a touching memoir that's funny but sad, and just like I say in my book versus movie, which came out yesterday, it was a book that just had a positive impact on me too, because it just made me appreciate the people in my life and appreciate my relationships and appreciate my spouse even more, and just the things that you think are annoying or whatever, whether it's with your spouse or other people in your life, just realizing how insignificant a lot of those things are, and we make these trivial things bigger than they really are. Because when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, what matters is just that person and your relationship with them and the positive things about that. So yeah, it just made me appreciate my own relationships all the more. So I just loved the impact the book had on me, as well as just loving the overall story and the way it was written. I really loved as well. So yeah, 5 stars for this book, and you can check out my book versus movie, which came out yesterday. And then I read I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, and this book itself is a legend, obviously. It has been so influential throughout the decades. It was written in the 50s, and it has impacted so many books, so many movies. It has spawned a whole new genre, and it has 3 adaptations itself, plus like movies that aren't direct adaptations, but they were definitely inspired by the book. But yeah, even though this book is so legendary, I was hesitant to read it because I had seen the Will Smith movie and I hadn't liked it. And so that movie kind of put me off from wanting to read this book for quite some time. But I should have known that you can't judge a book by its movie, because this book was so fantastic and I absolutely loved it. It is definitely like a character study of Robert Neville, and we see him progress as he lives as the last man on Earth while he has these vampire zombies around. And the disease was also really interesting, like the scientific background on the disease that Matheson comes up with, and just how it affects people mentally and psychologically as well as physically, of course. And yeah, I just thought it was so well written, so compelling, and it went in directions that I had not expected. So I would definitely recommend this one. It is pretty short. You can see right here, it's a skinny one. So it's definitely worth reading. And my book versus movie for this came out the end of January. And I was joined by Preston, who had been on for Blade Runner previously. And so I think we had a great conversation. I also have a follow-up video where I talk about Omega Man, which is one of the adaptations. So I have 2 videos about this book and its movies if you want to check those out. Also in the one for Omega Man, I have a commercial in there that I made. I thought the commercial was pretty fun. I enjoyed making it, and I thought it turned out pretty well. So if you want to check out that video to watch the commercial, definitely let me know what you think, because I don't know, I got a kick out of it. I had fun making it. So I'm curious what people thought of it, because no one commented on that video about the commercial. So anyway, if you saw that commercial, let me know what you thought, because I've never done something like that on my channel before. So anyway, next up we have Tony and Susan. I give this one 4 stars as well. This one is about a woman named Susan who is reading a novel, and the novel is called Nocturnal Animals, and it was written by her ex-husband. And so Nocturnal Animals is supposed to relate to Susan and the relationship she'd had with her ex-husband. And I still don't, like, I understand the parallels to some extent, but there's definitely things with this book where I'm like, wait, what? Like, I don't understand. And so because of that, it definitely stuck with me, because I was trying to make sense of it. And it is one I would like to read a second time. But even though I didn't totally understand it, I still really enjoyed the reading experience of this book. I was always invested in the story of Nocturnal Animals, where we follow Tony and stuff that happens with his wife and daughter, and he's harassed by these men in the night. And anyway, but I was also very interested in the story of Susan and hearing her backstory and her relationship with Edward and her current marriage. And there were different things in this book that were also relatable. For example, I think everyone can relate with this, but there's a part where she's like imagining a conversation with her current husband, and she's imagining what he would say, and it's like making her angry, even though he didn't actually say this, but she's just imagining, like, I know that's what he would say. And so she's getting angry at this imaginary conversation she's having. So I think we've all been there, right? Where we imagine conversations with someone and we get all riled up over something they didn't even say. We're just imagining that they would say it. But anyway, yeah, I really enjoyed this book. And my book versus movie for this comes out next Wednesday. And for those of you who have read the book, there are questions I raise in that video. So if you've read the book, please watch that video and comment down below answering my questions, because I've been trying to figure out the answers and I can't. So if you know the answer to the questions I have, definitely help me out and comment on that video and let me know. And then I read Finlay Donovan is Killing It, which I also read Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead, which is the second book in the series. The third book in the series, Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun, that came out today. Today is January 31st. So I will be reading that one in February. So you will hear my thoughts about that when I read it. But yeah, I read the first 2 books in the series, and the first book, I loved the premise where this Finlay Donovan is a author, and she writes like thrillers, mysteries, and she is having lunch with her editor, and she is talking about how she can't figure out how to get rid of a character, how to kill them off. But while she and her editor are talking about how to kill off this character, neither of them is saying that it's a fake character, right? So a lady overhears them talking about this, and this lady assumes that Finlay is a contract killer. And so she hires Finlay to kill someone, which I don't know how much of this plot, it's a spoiler to say, but anyway, Finlay is hired to kill someone because someone assumes she is a contract killer, and this false assumption just leads her down this rabbit hole of adventure. And the first book was very entertaining. However, I did stop like halfway because I kind of lost interest and I had other books I wanted to read. So I started this in December, and then I like took 3 weeks off and didn't finish it until this month. So I liked it, but obviously I wasn't so invested that I couldn't put it down, because I put it down for 3 whole weeks before picking it up again. So I guess that kind of tells you something. And yeah, the third book picks up where the first one left off, where, you know, she is still caught up in this world of crime and murder and mafia and hit killings and everything. And like, they're fun books and they have some humor in it, although the humor and a lot of the situations in the second book I just found too cliche. Like, I didn't feel like the author was coming up with new jokes or new funny situations. They were all jokes and situations where it's like, yeah, we've seen this done before. Like, this isn't something new. Like, the premise of the first book, being mistaken for a killer, like, I felt like that was a new idea and I really liked that aspect of it. But yeah, some of the other situations, specifically in the second book, it just didn't feel fresh. I mean, I enjoyed them well enough. I gave both of them 3 stars, which might be generous, to be honest, but for the second one in particular, that might be generous to give it 3 stars, but I don't know. I enjoyed them. I'll just leave it at that. They're fun, but it's not like the most original books I've ever read, I guess, especially the second one. And next up, I read The Fisherman by John Langan, and this book I gave 4 stars. And so on my Instagram, I asked people to recommend weird books because I was in the mood for just like a WTF type of book, I guess. So just one that's just like, wow, like, what did I just read? So someone recommended The Fisherman and I absolutely loved it. This was so good. It was like that cosmic horror, weird fiction type of thing. So it was like similar to like a Jeff Vandermeer book, like Annihilation kind of a thing. I've also heard it compared to H.P. Lovecraft, but I've never read Lovecraft, so I don't know if it's comparable or not. But yeah, this one, similar to Tony and Susan, this one also has a story within the story, and the story within the story takes up like half the book, so it's quite a bit. But I loved the story within the story, and I loved the overarching story we also had with Abe, who is a fisherman. And yeah, it was so creepy too. Like, there is a character in the story within the story. Her name is Helen. So when you hear her name come up, you know things are gonna get creepy and scary. And this was like one of the scariest books I've read in a while. Like, I read 10 Stephen King books last year, and none of them were as scary as The Fisherman, to be honest. Like, The Shining is the scariest Stephen King book I've read. But yeah, anyway, The Fisherman, very creepy, very unsettling, kind of gruesome at times, and definitely weird. Sorry, I just got interrupted, and now I don't know where I had left off. But basically, this book was fantastic, and I would highly recommend it if you like weird writing. And it is, like I said, it is scary, so be aware of that. But if you're into that, definitely check this one out. It was everything I wanted, so thank you so much to the person who recommended this to me. Next up, I read Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. So I've been hearing so much about Paul Tremblay, specifically Head Full of Ghosts is one I would like to read. So hopefully I get to that in February. But I read Cabin at the End of the World because it is being adapted into Knock at the Cabin, which I'm planning on doing a book versus movie for. But I might go see the movie on Saturday, but yeah, I don't know. No guarantees on that as far as when I'll see it. But anyway, so this one is about 2 guys who are with their daughter at a cabin for a vacation which I didn't really say what The Fisherman was about, but maybe the less you know, the better on that one anyway. Just know it's worth reading. Anyway, Cabin at the End of the World. These guys are at their cabin with their daughter when these people show up, and the people are acting like they are on a mission from a god, so to speak, as far as like how they are on a mission to save the world. And this family at the cabin is a crucial part of that mission. In this book, so I went into it already knowing Mariana from Impression Blend. I follow her on Goodreads, so I saw she recently read this book, and in her review she was like, this book was okay, like nothing really happens, like what was the point essentially. And so I went into this book already knowing that she had been disappointed in it, so I do think that affected how I felt, because at the halfway point I was starting to lose interest because I knew that she said she felt like it didn't go anywhere, and so I wasn't really enjoying it up until the halfway point. And then knowing that it ends up being disappointing, I was like, man, do I even want to finish this, because I'm not even liking it. But I did finish it, and I agree with Mariana, this one was disappointing, and at the end you're just kind of like, what was the point? Like, what? And I'm sure other people could read this book and have a better analysis of it, and they do see a point in it. But yeah, I don't know. I just didn't like this one. I gave it 2.5 stars. Maybe that's generous though. Maybe I should have just given it 2, because honestly, I didn't find any of the characters especially compelling. Like, I wasn't attached to any of them. Even the daughter, who we get stuff from her perspective, and she's cute, but I still wasn't super attached to her, you know? And I wanted to feel attached to at least some of these characters. And there was a twist I was hoping would happen, but I don't think it did. The ending is very ambiguous, so there's that too, where it's like maybe it could be interpreted in a variety of different ways, and maybe it's just up to us to decide what it all means and what the point of it is. But ultimately, I was just disappointed in this one, so I am curious what the movie does with it, and I'm curious if they will keep the ending the same. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't recommend this book personally. And for being my first Paul Tremblay book, it was kind of a disappointing one, but it's all uphill from here, right? Or is that the right phrase? It's all uphill? Uphill, it makes it harder, so that makes it seem like all uphill from here is a bad thing, but you know what I mean. And then next I read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This was also one of the books recommended when I asked for a weird book. Someone recommended Dark Matter. And this one was weird, not in the same way as The Fisherman was. Like I said, The Fisherman was just very cosmic horror and just like disturbing and weird, whereas Dark Matter was weird in like a scientific way, like maybe like Interstellar, where it's just like, whoa, like time bending, whatever type of thing, if that makes sense. But I did really enjoy this one. I gave this one 4 stars as well. I was tempted to give it 5, but I don't want to say too much about this because like the main thing that's going on in this book, it is a spoiler, and so I can't really talk about it. But we have our main character who one night is kidnapped. This kidnapping sends him into a world of craziness, is all I will say. But basically a huge theme of this book, and it's not a spoiler to say that a theme of this book is to appreciate your life and not take things for granted and to just appreciate your life. And that message was like hammered home so much, and it was kind of too much, where it's like, yeah, we get it, we need to appreciate everything we have. And also there's a point where, which I think I will do a follow-up video showing my Suntap Press edition while getting into the spoilers of this book, but there was a part where he's tempted to go down a certain route that would be bad. But I never felt like that was actually going to happen. So that whole time I'm like, come on, like I know he's not going to stick with this. So let's just move on to when things actually start happening. So the moments when maybe we were supposed to be like, wow, like, is this what he's going to do? I never thought he would. So it never put me on the edge of my seat because I just didn't believe it, you know. However, overall, like I said, I did really enjoy this book. I really love the concept. I thought it was very well executed, and it is a romance book that is a heavy part of this, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very touching, and I really did like the end as well. So overall, I would definitely recommend this book, and thank you for the recommendation for the person who recommended it on Instagram. And then I read LA Confidential by James Ellroy. How do I feel about LA Confidential? Do I love it or do I hate it? Or, I mean, I don't think I love it or hate it. I'm somewhere in between. But this book had so many characters, it had so many side plots, it had so much going on, and it's 500 pages, and it was impossible to keep track of everything and everyone while I was reading this book. So when I closed the book, I was like, if someone asked me to explain this plot, I would only be able to explain a small fraction, because so much of it I don't even know, because it was so hard to follow, and so that was just very frustrating. However, I went through and I didn't read it a full second time, but I like skimmed through it a second time and like would read the pertinent passages, and I made some very detailed notes. I ripped them out of the notebook, but like here are like just all of these notes that I made in order to understand this book. And I turned all of these notes into the classic wall with names and red string connecting people and notes. At the end of the day, after I went through all of that work, finally I understand the plot. And even so, there's still certain things where I'm like, wait, what was the point of that guy though? So I feel like this book took way too much work to just understand and to follow. So that part annoys me, while at the same time, I respect that James Ellroy wrote such a complex plot, right? But I don't love complex plots like that with like literally 50 different characters we're supposed to be keeping track of. Like, that's way too many. But because I spent so much time with the book, in some ways it makes me like it more, I guess, because yeah, I don't know, when you spend more time with something, I feel like it does make you have a better appreciation for it. So there is that. And I did have fun putting together my wall, and I'll be doing a video explaining the plot because it is so complex. And after I finished the book, like I said, I was like, wow, who is even who and what was connected to who? And so I was looking for a video to explain it to me, and I could not find a video or a blog post that got into the details of how everything happened. And so since a video like that did not exist, I decided to make it myself. So I'll be doing a video like the third week of the month is when my book versus movie comes out for LA Confidential. And the Tuesday before my book versus movie comes out, I will have the video detailing the book plot. So yeah, I have mixed feelings about this one, which I didn't even, like, my issues with this book, which I didn't even get into, along with the complexity of it, which it was like overly complex. It also was like pretty gross, like sexually gross, because there is this whole side plot of these dirty pictures. I don't want to be demonetized, so that's all I'll say. But so there's this whole side plot with those, and we get too detailed, and that was gross. And then also, like, it's pretty graphic violently too, because it is a mystery, a crime thriller, and some of the killings are just graphic. So I will just leave it at that. So I didn't enjoy that part. So, and also the way it was written too, and there was like so much slang, because this is based in the 50s, so there was so much 50s slang that I was just like, it took time to adjust to the way it was written, basically. However, I loved the character arcs of these characters. I loved also that like none of the characters were very likable and there was something appealing to that, right, where they did have more nuance to them. But yeah, so in some ways I enjoyed this book, but in other ways I just found it gross and difficult to understand. And so at the end of the day, would I recommend it? It depends on the person, to be honest. So because of the content, like I just said. But yeah, I gave this 3 stars. Maybe I would bump it up to 3.5, but I guess 3 stars is good for now. And then the last book I read this month was A Princess of Mars, which is by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This book is from 1912, and it is a sci-fi fantasy. So it is one of the earlier sci-fi fantasy books. And I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. Like, I thought I would find it okay, but I actually really enjoyed it, especially since fantasy isn't my thing. I like sci-fi, but not fantasy as much. But this one, I really enjoyed it. I couldn't necessarily relate to any of the characters, but I still thought it was a fun time and it was a good adventure. And there were moments that were just very cheesy and had me rolling my eyes. And yet even so, yeah, I enjoyed it and I would recommend it. And my book versus movie for this will be out the end of the month, which if you follow me on Instagram, I post my monthly book versus movie schedule. And the last Wednesday of the month, I didn't know what I was going to cover, so I left it blank. But I am covering John Carter, so that is what I ended up choosing. So, and I was just cut off yet again. I don't know what is up with my storage on here. But anyway, that wraps it up for my reading wrap up. Anyway, the best book of the month was, spoiler alert, my least favorite book of the month was Cabin at the End of the World. But yeah, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, and I will see you next time. Bye.